And we are live. JT here, and welcome to the huddle. The huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching on YouTube or whether you're listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focus on the here and the now. And I guarantee you, you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. Been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. Last time we saw in person at Top 90 Red Black Weekend, I kind of planted the seed and said, hey, would you be open to coming in the huddle? And, schedules aligned, he's back settled out west. And, we kind of found some period to, have a conversation before we hit this recruiting blackout in July. My guest in the huddle today is currently serving as the defensive coordinator at the University of Calgary Dinos. My guest in the huddle today is Coach Ben DeAndrea. How are you today, brother?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And before we get kicked off, I want to take a moment to count my blessings. For me, it's a daily practice. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find those days where I'm most consistent, I'm most intentional counting my blessings. I do find those days are filled with a little bit more love, a little bit more joy, a little bit more peace. And I'm a big believer, biggest blessing you can give anyone is your time and energy. So just want to thank you again for blessing us with some of your time and energy here today, brother.
Happy to be here. I've been looking forward to getting on here, so that's good.
Okay, okay. Um, so one of the first things I like to do in the huddle is to remind others and more importantly myself that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. I had a coaching colleague and a great friend that would always remind me, hey, we all have these things that unique and different. Our responsibility really is to celebrate them. So I'm curious, what's an interesting fact about you that maybe a lot of people don't know that you'd be open to sharing with our community today?
Starting off with a tough question already, eh? Okay. You know what? This is funny. For me, I'm a very much a hometown guy. I was born and raised in Calgary. I went to school and had a ton of my career out in Ontario. The one thing I'll say is this is it was very very tough for me to leave Calgary originally, and very very tough for me to leave Ontario and come back to Calgary. I'm very much a homebody. I can be I can talk and I can be a part of a group and everything, but I very much like my alone time as well. So as
Mm.
much as I love working with 110 guys in a locker room and a full coaching staff and all that kind of stuff, that's my career. I'm also a very personal person that I need to go off and spend some time in the woods, go fishing or camping, backpacking, all that kind of stuff. I am a person that does need that time by myself. And having just done a drive across the entire country to settle out west, and doing that drive alone, it was great for me. Listening to podcasts, throwing on some music, and spending some time with your own thoughts is an important place for me to be able to kind of clear your thoughts at time, and in an otherwise very busy schedule. So.
Mm. I appreciate you sharing that. And I can also appreciate how you feel like yourself. It sounds like you are someone who you're more geared towards being what they call an introvert. Like you kind of recharge in solitude and stillness out in nature. Um, but it's an interesting dynamic as again a high quality coach and leader because you're constantly on, right? When you're in your profession. So I'm curious, have you always known that about yourself, that you're someone who typically like you recharge your batteries in solitude and stillness? in quiet and peace, or was this something you've kind of discovered about yourself along your journey?
I mean, I've always been a person that's been very outdoorsy and able to get out and do all those things, but this is definitely a learned thing. I grew up in a family. My sister is definitely an extrovert. My brother is the same way, and I do really love a lot of those things. About being an extrovert, but like you said, to be able to recharge and go and do my own thing. I used to always go fishing, camping, hiking, or whatever with other people. And I always just thought it was the activity that I loved. But it is that, when I just started to do them on my own, I found that, it was the same sort of thing, but, even on a more of an extent, you get to listen to whatever music you want to listen to. You get to kind of go do what you want to do. And again, having that alone time where you can clear your head, it's definitely a learned experience that I definitely recommend for others, and I try to push my extrovert siblings to do the same sort of things. Not with a great success rate just yet with them, but no, it's definitely helped me and definitely something I've learned in recent years.
Yeah, I'm curious. I wonder, as you kind of like, if we simply take a step back and look at society, do you think that idea of like stillness, that quiet, that peace, that sort of alone time, do you think it's do you think it's we need to be almost more intentional because the world is coming at us so quickly, social media, text, like we're just always quote unquote connected? Like, do you think it's more like, do you think we need to be more mindful of it now than we were like 5, 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, a lot of my job is to be connected on social media,
Yeah.
to be able to recruit and identify players and talk to them. And again, most of the guys we recruit would much rather talk to me on Instagram or over text than, getting a phone call like when I was being recruited, which is great. I love parts of the social media world. I gained so much knowledge from, what I enjoy on social media and that kind of stuff. But I used to do, and I still do, and I planned on still doing it. I would do Algonquin trips for a week every spring, as kind of a reset. As soon as we're done our spring camp, all that kind of stuff, and the busy time of the year is done, I would take off in the woods for a week. And what I loved about Algonquin Park so much is no reception. You don't have the ability to text. You don't have the ability to go on media and everything. And you find the first couple of days you're grabbing at your phone and you realize, well, there's no purpose to it. There's no reason for it. And I find, like you said, it's very, very easy to get into the now and into the experience that you're currently experiencing when you do things like that.
Yeah.
And I find when I come back, I'm just so refreshed and I'm ready to kind of attack everything else. And again, everybody, to each their own, whatever works for you. But I always find that reset in the spring is so great for me. Just to disconnect for a week and make sure I alert all my recruits and coaches and all that kind of stuff that you can't reach me. I'm not ignoring you. You just can't reach me, and I'll get back to you when I get back. But it is a great reset for me. And again, it's one of those things that when I come back to it, I'm just so much more energetic and into what I'm doing at that moment.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting you talk about that, right? And what I really got from that, it's like that practice. Like, where can you create that daily practice where, not everyone may have that ability or that desire to go to Algonquin and be totally unplugged, but can you create that stillness? Maybe if you don't have it, maybe it's just like, can you unplug for like an hour a day? Can you unplug for maybe it's a Sunday? So it's just an interesting, like as you're sharing, I was just thinking, how can you better the practice, right? And just create those periods where you just like you just have the ability to sit with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. That's something I have not mastered yet by any means. So, I'm gonna write a note down here
Yeah.
and make sure I pull that away for myself. But because
Yeah.
I know the effect when I physically can't do it, and how that positively impacts the rest of my year essentially. So, yeah, it's definitely something to look into. But I cannot say I've mastered that skill yet.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the beauty, right? Being a high quality coach, right? That practice is like you can have them, but we sometimes, just constantly working on those EDDs, right? Those fundamentals, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Uh, I'm curious, your journey, part of the huddle is learning about others' journey. Part of your journey was as a high quality athlete at first, right? Like you said, you were born and raised in Calgary, moved out to Ontario, had the opportunity to be to play at Queen's University, won a Vanier Cup there. And then you transitioned quickly to, becoming a high quality coach. So sport has obviously played an important role for you in your life. You're also kin background as well. So you can tell sport, physical activity, it's important to you getting outside. Curious, what is a important life lesson that you've taken from sport? And I'm sure we can probably, talk about dozens of lessons, but what's that one life lesson you find you're applying to different areas of your life today?
You know what? A big one that it seems so obvious now, and it's not so obvious to young athletes too. But talent is not everything. Work ethic, and your ability to work in a team dynamic is everything.
Mhm.
And of course it means so much to us in sport and when we're trying to build a team and all that kind of stuff. But I remember, growing up, I was not, the best athlete around. I kind of had to work to get myself there. When I first started football and everything, I was very much the guy getting the last kind of reps, and worked myself into high school to being a solid player. But I wasn't the top recruited player in the country by any means. I had a few schools talking to me for sure. And but what I found is over the years, the guys that were ahead of me, the guys that were more talented, all that kind of stuff, I just had this want and this need to be better and improve myself. And it wasn't to, beat them. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to get myself into the conversation and be a part of something. And,
Mhm.
you know, my experience at Queens was the same thing. I came in as a 17-year-old, and so my first year, there were guys on the teams that were 27. There's a very big difference in terms of skill and physical development and all that kind of stuff at the time. But you know, I just worked myself into a place that by the time I was in my third year, I was finally becoming a starter on the team. And, I was a starter on a very senior team that ended up winning the national championship that year.
Mhm.
And by the end of that, by my time I was in my, fifth and sixth season, essentially with Queens, I had grown into a piece that was, a very, very important piece of that defense. And you see it all the time. The most talented guy coming out of, those Team Ontario tryouts, the Team Alberta tryouts, those aren't always the guys that you necessarily want. It's the guy that you can see that they are just obsessed with it. They're
Mhm.
obsessed with the sport itself. They're obsessed with the nuances. They're obsessed with getting better and learning.
Mhm.
Gym, film session, all that kind of stuff. It's so important that they love it and not just necessarily good at it right now, because those are the guys that play at a really high end near the end of the career. And I'm not saying I was necessarily a super high end player. I was never an all-star, but I was a key piece to a team. And big piece too is being able to work in a team dynamic, knowing your role and doing it to the best of your ability and trying to expand that role. Those are the guys I look for. Guys that just know how to kind of put their head down and grind and work no matter how well it's going, knowing that they can fall back on that work ethic at any time.
Mhm.
Whereas, sometimes a talented guy, sometimes not something's not going well. Those are the guys that you see get down on themselves first or get down on their teammates first or those kinds of things. So,
Mhm.
the places I was at previously, at Queens, Coach Snyder was really, really good with that. The character piece is the ultimate piece. This could be the best player in the world, but if he's not a good character and he's not going to be good in the locker room, that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
it's going to be very, very hard to be successful with it, and especially in a team dynamic, 110 guys.
Mhm.
So, it's a big, big piece that we're trying to do here. Coach Shane has been great with all that. It's not about who's the best player. It's who do we think is going to be the best fit for our environment and
Mhm.
work themselves into something that is going to make them a dominant player or at least a very, very valued member of the team.
Mhm. Yeah, no, it's interesting as you share that, right? And a couple of sort of themes popped out, right? It seemed like that willingness to learn and grow, right? Whatever it's like that beginner's mindset, that white belt mentality. Do you think it ultimately comes back to like that curiosity piece? Like if we think back to, I think of my own kids. Like as kids, we're curious, right? Like if you look at them, they're constantly like in their environment, they're trying new things, they're they're trying out new environments, they're picking things up. They're like, do you think it's that curiosity to like, there's a different way to do it? Do you think that that is a fundamental quality of, if we're talking like a high quality student athlete?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be. It has to be. I'm very much, again, in retrospect, I really didn't enjoy it at the time, being, the run to the litter, if you will. When I first got to Queens and that kind of stuff, and even young in my football career, I so badly wanted to be that all-star, the guy that's catching the game-winning catch. The guy that people are always talking about. I so wanted to be that. And I just wasn't that. I had to work my way into being, part of that conversation. And I hated it at the time, but I think because of that, it turned me into, being able to pass a bunch of those guys that probably were ahead of me
Mhm.
eventually. So I think it was so great for me in the end. It developed this work ethic and this want, and, my love for the game and doing the small things that not everybody does, stemmed from that. I think because I had to do it to become a good player. I couldn't I couldn't just rely on athleticism. I had to be so in tune with the
Yeah.
nuances of the game, the film study, the extra work you have to do to take care of your body, all that kind of stuff. And in terms of, you said curiosity, there was always something that, what am I going to improve with my game this year?
Yeah.
What is it that is going to take me to, okay, I understand the defense really well, but I don't understand, what the offense is trying to do to me very well, and or whatever it is, we had a couple players on our team that were really good at taking care of their bodies and just were unbelievable with their nutrition. And this is something I never knew before. And by the time I was in my fifth and sixth year, I finally figured it out.
Mhm.
Right. So I completely agree with you. And it, to each their own and whatever works for them and stuff. But you find the guys that play at a really high level, and not even just from an athletic standpoint, but know the game really well, and a lot of them turned into coaches. I completely agree with you. There's those curiosity of not doing the same thing over and over again, and finding that new, edge. What's going to be my edge for this year, and what's going to make me better because of it.
It's interesting, right? Like, as you talk about that curiosity, right? I think to a student athlete that, ended up, playing at the post-secondary at Western, and again, wasn't the biggest, wasn't the strongest, wasn't the fastest, but just this curiosity, like it always had this curiosity to be like, just ask questions like, how can I do this better? And I think back to a conversation we had at Red Black, right? We were talking about one of the former student athletes you work with, like Eric Colonna. You start to see what he's doing with Pick Six Athletics, and it's just that curiosity. Like, is that, I guess, because that was part of your journey, like you had to figure out how to maximize every bit of your gifts, your talents, abilities. Do you found that those kind of student athletes kind of gravitate to you because they're kind of sort of cut from the same cloth? Kind of curious your
I,
perspective.
I will say, yes, I hope so. In the case of Eric Colonna, it's an unbelievable, perspective on it, because that guy was so motivated to be the best he could possibly be,
Yeah,
and he probably had the same realization and understanding that he's probably not going to be the best player in the league. He might not be the best player on the team, but you were going to get every ounce out of everything out of him. And
yeah,
I always laugh and talk about, when he monetizes Pick Six Athletics, I'm hoping I'm going to be getting, at least a stipend or something out of it, because, I would pose and I would talk about something in the meeting room. Hey guys, see this, you see how they're doing this. We need to be an eye. This is what they're trying to do. Be aware of it, understand it. And then of course, a week later you would see a post on Pick Six, and he's done hours and hours of research on just that one coaching point. And he speaks of the coaching point that I just talked about, for 5 minutes in the meeting room. And now there's a full breakdown of NFL play and all this kind of stuff. And again, that's just the type of player he was. I would tell guys, you need to run more. What's in the running program isn't enough for a defensive back in Canadian football. You are running so much that, if you don't have the amount that you're supposed to run, like if you've never run a 5K before as a defensive back, you're going to be running that in a football game, no problem. You've got to
yeah,
be able to do these things. And then all of a sudden he took off, and he's, I'm having to pull him back because he's running too much. And he wouldn't do that. So he was, a dog on a leash, in the sense that he would take everything, and he was, obviously such a cerebral football player. He's super intelligent player,
yeah,
and person. But he just had this knack for, when you would take small coaching points and you're trying to hit home with something, he would take it and run with it and go to the full extreme with it. And that's why he became such a good football player,
mhm,
near the end of his career. And it's why he's so successful in his business as well. he's a great example of that. I don't think anybody can do that. He is a
Yeah.
very special person in that regard. But I agree with you. I was very very similar in that I knew I wasn't probably going to be the best player on the team, but
Yeah.
there were lots of things that I was going to do to make sure that I was a valued player on the team.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you sort of talk about, you gave that example of, you know, high quality, high performers. Very often it's not about like they have that ambition, that drive, that openness, that coachability, that curiosity, like we're talking about. But then you kind of have the opposite challenge, we'll say, where it's kind of like harnessing it and making sure that, they're not overdoing it, right? So that they, stay fresh and that they're ready to like peak perform.
Yeah, I mean it's funny with him too. You plant a little seed in his head and it
Yeah.
grows. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah.
is phenomenal. And we used to talk about if you're going to play the free safety position, you have to be sprinting at all times because free safety is one of those few positions where you can run yourself into the play. If you actually work hard enough and run fast enough and you're constantly on the same speed, you're going to find yourself in a heck of a lot more football plays than the guy that doesn't think he needs to in that. And Eric was one of those guys that he prided himself of running past people,
Yeah.
and we would show it on film too, and just a lot of it was his off-season training. He was running every single day in the
Yeah.
off-season, and some people would be crazy, think he's crazy because he's running too much. But you watch it show up on film, just
Yeah.
the angles that he took and his ability to go sideline to sideline and hustle and angle tackle basically at any time. So yeah, he was phenomenal for that. Obviously we're still close and everything, and
Yeah.
now that he's starting to coach with Pick Six Athletics, I'm making sure I'm hitting him up to find out who the top DBs are and that in Ontario. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's a great example of that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, right? It's really cool to kind of seeing you sort of like playing it forward, right? Like you're sharing that wisdom from through your lived experience. So I'm curious, you were part of a great coaching staff at Queens, right? Like the really cool part was, what's unique about your journey is you went back to your alma mater and were coached, right? And you coached, for 9 seasons there. And then you're sort of at this where it's just this next iteration of Queens football, right? And it's right there. And then you chose to take a new adventure, right? Coach Shahan, obviously there's some Queens ties there. Um, Curious, what inspired you to embrace and take on this new adventure and to go back home to Calgary?
Well, I'll say this: you're exactly right with that Queen staff. It was phenomenal. I've had been so lucky with some of the coaches that I've been able to work with over the years. Even prior to Coach Snyder, Coach Shane, he was my coach, and the first coach that I worked for, as a full time coach in our league, and the lessons that you learn from someone like him, and then Greg Marshall was our defensive coordinator at the time, longtime CFL
Yeah.
vet, all that kind of stuff, and he was very, very different in the regard that he was very much a front end guy and I was very much a back end guy. The pages of notes that I still have from being in the meeting room with Greg are amazing, amazing things. And then you go into the new era, with Coach Snyder and Coach McManus and all that kind of stuff at Queens. And I've had some great mentors, and it was an amazing situation. I'll say this: I was ready to settle in and be in Kingston for life. It was a phenomenal place. It's my alma mater. I just really, really enjoyed and loved everything about Queens and the coaching staff. There was probably one job in this country that I would leave for, and it happened to pop up. So, and even when Coach Shane, called me and asked me to interview and everything, I was, I've worked with Ryan before, and I know him very well, and I know this program well. It's always a program I've always wanted to be a part of.
Mhm.
Um, and even still, it was hard for me to leave, because there is, so much that I would be leaving behind, and especially where that Queens team is at right now, just right on the cusp. I have a feeling those guys are going to make big waves, in years to come. So, yeah, it was definitely difficult, but in order for me to grow, the defense coordinator position is always kind of the position I've wanted. I've loved coaching specials, and working with Coach McManus. He was my DB coach when I played at Queens, so we have a long, long history together. And it was awesome working with him because it really felt like our defense. He would let me kind of really get breakdowns in and give good suggestions on what we should be playing, and especially in the secondary and that kind of stuff. So we worked really, really well together too. So I did get my defensive fix when I was at Queens too, and felt like I was really a big part of it and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes down to it, I've said it essentially since the day I started getting into coaching is this would be the dream job.
Yeah.
Being a defense coordinator at the University of Calgary, just the amount of talent that comes through these doors and their ability to, get to conference and national championship games, and then of course the amount of guys that they send on to the CFL and all that kind of stuff, and of course it's back home for me too.
Yeah.
Getting back and being in the city of Calgary, it's a place I love, and I still have great, a ton of great friends in town and family, and being close to the mountains again. It's a great place. So I'm really, really excited to be back and working with the guys that are in the room here.
Yeah. I can appreciate where you're coming from. One, you can definitely see, I know we were talking a few minutes ago about that curiosity. It sounded like you kind of had this curiosity to be like, okay, you kind of feel called, like there's this opportunity that's always kind of been there. And when it actually physically manifests, you're like probably similar to me. It's like, okay, I can take a new challenge on, right? Like I get to really kind of test myself and see, where I'm at. I'm curious from your perspective, what has it been like the last few months, kind of going back? Like, what have you like any takeaways as you've kind of ventured back home and stepped into this new adventure?
Well, it's been crazy. We I have been back and forth like 4 or 5 times, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm finally out here. I don't get my house until July, so still a few moving parts, but yeah, it's been awesome. Again, like my fiance just moved out here on Monday, and we're pregnant with our first child. It's in August too, so a million moving parts. But from a football standpoint, it's different here. It is. People in the city truly care about the football team. The alumni backers, and there's such great support as there was at Queens as well. But people really want to win here, and people get upset when you're not winning here. And it's such a great challenge, and it's been amazing meeting the people here. And I'll say this: the football players in this room are awesome. They are great people. I had a lot of fun coaching these guys at spring camp. It's very different defense from what they've played in the past, and so there's obviously a learning curve and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
man, do they love it. You can just kind of see it in their eyes. The same kind of thing you would see in Eric Colonna during meetings, and his eyes light up, and he writes some notes and stuff. You see that across the room.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I'm very excited. I'm antsy to get going now that I'm in town, and it's been great going to the workouts and seeing the guys run and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that's really obvious here is the support staff and the other coaches that we have. We've got NFL players as positional coaches and strength coaches and all that kind of stuff too. It's pretty high level, and people really do care about this place.
Mm. So it sounds like with these, changes in leadership, it seems like it's brought sort of like some renewed energy, enthusiasm, and just it's kind of okay. I don't know, it just feels different.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes it's just change
Yeah.
that's needed, and I'll go back to the same thing. I've been through this before, almost a retool or a rebuild or just change. When Coach Snyder first got to Queens, it was the same sort of thing. And, you're jumping into a new place and reevaluating everybody. It doesn't matter if you've been a starter for 4 years or you haven't played a single down yet. You're being evaluated on what you're doing in the meeting room and what you're doing with your teammates, and then ultimately what you're doing on the field. And you can just see that that works really well for some people. They absolutely love everything about it, and some people, they want to go back to the old way, and that's totally fine. And it was the same thing at Queens, but ultimately, this you know this is the bar. This is where it is. This is where everybody is right now. Bit of a reset mentality. It's been great, and you could just see guys that maybe haven't been pushed for the last couple of years because, they know they're the guy and all that kind of stuff. All of a sudden they're being challenged on things. And you can see some of them just absolutely flourish and things that, and again, it's just a different way of doing things. It's not necessarily better or wrong, but a new set of people and a reset. You can see some real excitement in guys' eyes because the last couple of years of just not quite making the playoffs. That's bothering a lot of people here, including the players, and so they're very excited, really really well in tune with what they want to do and what they want to accomplish from it. And Coach Shane has said it a number of times with guys. If you guys want to win here, you can, and you will. But how bad do you want to win? Do you want to just be here for the experience and be a Calgary Dino because it's a winning program and be a part of that fraternity? Or do you want to be a guy that wants to win and actually be a part of one of those things? Because it's not just about wanting it. You have to do all those million things that we discussed before, to be a top player and teammate and all that kind of stuff. So it is really exciting. I'm excited, and it's been great. My phone has been blowing up with, "Hey coach, when can we have meetings? Hey coach, when can you and I meet one-on-one?" All that kind of stuff, which is a great thing. I'm super busy, but I love it. And every second that I can get with those guys, I am trying to do it, ahead of the season.
Okay. Okay. I'm curious, as someone who's naturally kind of curious and likes to, like, do you find you get great joy in sort of building things or rebuilding things, creating a new? Like, do you find like you would prefer to sort of be in that sort of the climb to the mountain as opposed to just being at the top and then just trying to, status quo, just got to keep yourself there? What are you? I'm curious.
Well, you know what? I mean, there's obviously benefit to both.
Mhm.
I love the fact that I'm in this current situation right now. I feel like I'm confident in this situation. There's things that we can do to kind of get ourselves to that mountain, but
Yeah.
at the same time, there's nothing better than being at the top. I don't want to say hate, but there's a lot of people that look, that saying it's lonely at the top. That's a real thing for sure. But at the same time, when you're getting those types of reactions, you're doing something right. And all I say it all the time to defensive players. If at the end of practice, an offensive head coach is really upset about practice, good job. That's one of those things that you take that as a compliment as a defensive player. If they don't think the offense executed very well and the defense was beating them up that practice, fantastic, way to go. And it's one of those things that it's a learned trait. You can't get upset about it. And you have to understand from other people's perspectives and everything.
Yeah.
But I love the challenge. I love changing things and moving things and always striving to finding a way to do things better. So yeah, being here and with this group, I'm pretty excited about it.
Okay. Okay. Um, Curious, what's you're talking a few minutes ago about being the right fit. So obviously, it's attracting those curious, student athletes, right? That want to be better, on the football field, in the classroom, in meetings, in their academics. Is there anything else kind of you're looking for in terms of, yeah, you know what, they would be a great fit. This could be the spot for you. I'm curious, what else you looking for, ideally, coach?
You know what? I think it depends on the person, because some guys, they're phenomenal football players and they're great academic kids. They're great physically, and you go, this guy's going to be in the CFL in 4 years. You can see that, and those guys are great fits from the football side and from the university side. And then you see the same thing, kind of what we discussed before in terms of, okay, he's not quite there on the football standpoint, or he's not quite sure what he wants to do school wise yet. But there's just this untangible, whatever it is, effort, desire, hates losing, but is a never give up kind of guy. Like you can see those things on tape, a little bit on tape, but when you actually go watch somebody play, and you can just see it's the fourth quarter, they're down 14 points, but he is all over the field. You know what I mean? And he's pursuing on the backside of something that, he could very easily just give up and blame the guy beside him. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of those kinds of things, and it all comes down to character. Are we able to build a relationship? Do you understand who I am and what I'm trying to get you to accomplish, and vice versa? So It really has to be a good fit and a good feel for what your current team is as well. Having too many big egos in a small room doesn't work out all that often, even though
Yeah.
they all might be great football players. But are they big egos, but understand that his success is also my success?
Yeah.
There are guys that are able to understand that, especially top end players. They might come in and they were the best linebacker recruit in the country, but they come in and we have, essentially three CFLers sitting at linebacker right now in their fourth and fifth year. Are you able to not play and just try to be a sponge in that room and take as much from those players as you possibly can before they're gone? Or are you going to be up in arms that you're not getting the playing time that you should or you could have at another school? So there's a lot of those things, and you try to be as detailed in creating a recruiting playbook and all those kinds of things, but it really comes down to relationships, work ethic, and how you think they're going to fit in your current team dynamic.
Well, and it's interesting, right? Like you talked about that high effort, right? Like we all want, especially if we're talking a sports context, I guess really in a business context as well. We all want high effort people, right? People that show up early, they're going to do the work, they're not punching clock, they'll stay that extra little bit, they'll go that extra mile. But it sounds like what you were talking about as well is that humbleness to understand that you're not the wheel, you're part of the wheel, right? And that we all have our different roles and responsibilities. And it's kind of finding out how you can best help the wheel continue to move right in the right direction. That's what
Yeah, and you know what, Coach Snyder used to put it this way in terms of, you need to be able to understand what your role is and do that role to the best of your ability. You don't have to be happy with that role. You can always be trying to better yourself and give yourself a bigger role. But as long as you understand what that role is and the importance to, like you said, the full picture,
yeah.
um, those are the guys you want. If the guys don't have the understanding of, no, we need you to do this, and this is going to be great for you in the end, it's tough to win with those guys, and it's tough to have some of those guys in the locker room.
Mhm.
But yeah, exactly. Being a part of something is so much more important. I'll say this, and this is pretty unanimous. People would way rather be a part of a national championship team and having done something amazing than to be a league all-star on a team that could have been.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty unanimous, thought process. So, trying to get everybody to grasp that, is huge.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love how you're kind of sharing that. I remember hearing recently, um, uh, paraphrasing a Mike Tyson quote. I actually heard it on another podcast. He talked about this idea of, discipline is doing things that you hate with like great enthusiasm. Like, I don't want to, I really don't want to turn the play inside, but I'm willing to kind of eat it and turn the play to one of my brothers so they can make the tackle. So I'm kind of curious your idea on like, it's understanding that you're not always going to like everything. It's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows, but you can choose how you see it and you can attack it with great enthusiasm. Kind of curious your thoughts.
Yeah, and you know what? It's awesome. It's such a great quote, because you have those days, and we've all had the spring camp days where it's pouring rain or it's even snowing or something like that, and it's cold and wet, and you don't really want to be out there. And then all of a sudden you hear two guys scream and just start, getting jacked up, before practice. And then now all of a sudden there's energy through the whole practice. And now we just had a great practice, one of the best practices of the year,
Yeah.
in a situation where we could have just had everybody huddled on the sideline and, not, just waiting to leave. You know what I mean? So 100%, it's all attitude and effort. And there's no way that every person can be that guy that brings the energy every practice. It's just not,
Yeah.
it's just not attainable. Sometimes you have a bad day, you're tired, you didn't sleep well, you got a million things going on in your life, exams, whatever it is. Um, but to be able to be a part of that and match energy, and again, like you said, just being able to flip that switch to, well, I have to do this anyways, I might as well do it to the best of my ability, and which with whatever energy I have right now. I
Mhm.
love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I want to be mindful of your time, especially since you just completed a nice cross-country trip for the for the handful of times. I'm curious, as someone who is guiding and mentoring, emerging leaders, right? Because essentially what you're doing now is you are helping mentor that next generation of CEOs, of professional athletes, of dads, and just people that are going to move the world forward. If you could offer you know a piece of advice, words of wisdom to an emerging leader who's, let's say, maybe going through a challenging time, maybe about to embark on their next adventure, what words of wisdom would you share with them?
I mean, being a great teammate is it comes down to everything in life, and it doesn't matter what part of the world you're in. It could be in your marriage, it could be in your work life, on a team dynamic, all that kind of stuff. And just service leadership would be the other thing I would really really you always admired in somebody. When the CEO of a company or the head coach or whatever, he's the first guy to go pick up garbage and make sure things are clean because it just needs to be done. Sure, we can talk about it later. Hey guys, we can't have the locker room look that messy. I had to go in and do this, but I first thing I started instilling here is and it happens on most football teams is hey rookies, you guys got to clean up the bags. Hey rookies, you guys got to go do that, and it happens everywhere. And to me it's no veterans, it's your job to make sure that's done. And when you trust a rookie that he can get that job done, sure, you can hand the reins over. But to be able to be that first guy through the wall, and again, you watch so many documentaries like the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary and stuff, and there's that really powerful scene. Like sure, he was hard on people, and he wasn't necessarily people's favorite teammate, all that kind of stuff, but he never asked them to do something that he wouldn't do. Um, when you see a veteran jump in on a scout team and he's doing the scout cards to the best of his ability, and there's a couple of rookies standing on the sideline that didn't jump in and take that rep, it means a lot. I remember being a vet, and I loved playing on the scout teams. I loved going against our starting offense and doing that, and until Coach Shane would kick me out of the drill or whatever. But I love that kind of thing, and what it does is it brings enthusiasm to everybody else behind. It's you're not just servicing and being you're a part of something big, and there is the ability to go make plays and have fun and all those kinds of things. So I think it is something that's so transferable to everything in life. Service leadership and being a good teammate, and again, just doing everything that you possibly can, because what you'll find is people are going to reciprocate. People are going to do the same thing back, and now you're in a good situation. And again, whatever aspect of life that's going to be.
Hmm. I especially love the fact of how you tied it to other aspects of life, like being a great teammate. Yeah, it translates well to sport, but I think being a teammate, like you said, in your relationships, right, in your professional, in your career and school, like it's such, like you said, transferable skill.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, what can we have in store? Like, I'm kind of curious. You're in this kind of process of building and recreating the next iteration of Calgary Dino football. If where can people keep their eyes open? What can we do if they want to learn more? If they want to help and support the program. Yeah, kind of curious. Where should we keep our eyes on?
Well, you know what? I think we're just kind of in grind mode right now to try to, get our team ready for the fall. But we've made some great waves in recruiting this year. We got a couple guys that, have bounced back from other programs, and we got some guys coming in from D1 last year and stuff. So this team, I think, is going to make some waves, and we've got a great opportunity in front of us to go, shock some people, and that's the goal, and we're not going to be too lofty with expectations, all that kind of stuff. We just got to kind of grind one day at a time and see how good we can get. But there are players here that are really, really high end and really, really want to win. Um, so I'm excited in that regard. Recruiting is obviously kicked off, and Coach Shea and I both moving from Ontario to get back to Calgary. There's lots of moving parts and everything, but we've got our eyes on some kids that are going to be some difference makers for the program. And our backgrounds, coach coming from Quebec, and we have a few other coaches from Quebec, and myself being in Ontario, all that kind of stuff. Our goal is to build a good nucleus from Alberta and Southern Alberta, but then steal the few guys that we want out of BC, steal a few out of Ontario, Quebec, and kind of everywhere in between, that kind of stuff. So That's been the recipe when the teams have done really well here. You think of, their 6 straight Hardy Cup wins and then the national championship in 2019 before the pandemic and stuff. And you look at that roster, it's built from this area with a few outliers. Then there's, the Philpots of the world and all that kind of stuff. So it's really exciting. We know, if we do our jobs right and we work hard enough, that we can win here and we should win here. So it's really exciting to be a part of that. There's lots of work to do, but I'm no stranger to that. I'm excited for it, and I know the guys that are in house, coaches, staff, and players are all kind of on the same wavelength that we can make some waves, and hopefully we do it sooner than later.
Awesome. Well, we'll be sure to share all the social media handles in the description, either on the podcast or on YouTube, and just so people, obviously Alberta can keep an eye on it, but like those few outliers outside the province that are maybe piqued by the idea of living out in Calgary, so they can keep watching. Brother, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you. You know, we obviously first met, when I was on a different adventure, when I was still teaching. But the one thing I really got from this conversation is I always appreciate our conversations. I'll just give you some context that when I was in my coaching at Lucas, I would always just kind of observe people come in. And you were always someone that when you came in to practice or a game, there was always this energy about you. Like you could really feel how much you care and you love like the student athletes that you want to be about. And I remember having a few conversations and our student athletes at the time just spoke so highly of you. So now, like through our conversation, I definitely start to understand, again, what an amazing, soon to be father, partner, teacher, coach, mentor, but more importantly, the amazing human being you are, brother. So I really just want to thank you again, like the importance of being a great teammate, but more importantly, being an amazing human being. So thank you for that, brother.
Well, I'll take the compliment, thanks, but I think you're pumping me up a little bit too much there, JT. But it's been great. I love this job, and there's a reason why I'm doing it, and it's to get to work with young athletes and guys that I remember being in their shoes, or being a part of something like that. And there's no substitute to playing. Playing is the best thing in the world, but being able to work with these guys and try to help them on their journeys, and win with a group, it's a great experience. And so whatever vibe you're getting, it's genuine. I love being here and I love being a part of it. I get to wake up and go to work every day with a smile on my face, which not everybody gets to do. So yeah, it's pretty exciting, and thank you for having me on. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. So, folks, as I remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's a consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually helps you to create greater results in your life. Coach DeAndrea dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. So my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations, if it resonated with you, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a loved one, a teammate, just someone you think that would benefit from listening to these positive, inspiring, and empowering ideas. The more people we have listening, understanding, and applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, love having these conversations with you in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day, everyone.